Nicola Benedetti, welcome to Classic FM at what is an enormously busy time for you both personally and professionally, directing the Edinburgh International Festival. It's a huge event. What's the process like? What are you thinking about when you curate weeks of events?
Wow, that's a big question. We're trying to balance a lot of different things. Obviously, the tradition of the festival is long. We're in our 77th year, and being the original festival, the one that started everything in Edinburgh, but also trying to uphold several different art forms. So we have a really strong opera tradition. We have a really strong dance tradition. Of course, music was begun mostly with classical music, some traditional music. But has become very eclectic in its musical portrayal. And then, of course, theatre and drama in all sorts of different forms, some smaller scale, some larger scale. We also have a really strong social mission, that of education, that of sort of ticketing schemes, year-round programmes that don't just take place in those 3 weeks of the festival. When you bring all of those responsibilities together, it's a huge amount to balance. And just to add one more thing to the mix, international is in our name, but we are firmly rooted in Scotland and in Edinburgh. So we also try to present a really careful balance of Scottish artists and those from all over the world.
Eclectic is definitely a great word to describe the programme. You've got the traditional, say in things like Carmen and Così fan tutte, but also new works and pop musicians as well. How important is it to have that kind of range in order that you can attract a wide an audience as possible?
It's a really interesting debate that takes place constantly within the organisation. It takes place also in the press. It takes place amongst journalists, amongst audience members. We have a lot of kind of long-serving, loyal audience members, but we're always trying to open the doors to new people that perhaps don't identify with the brand Edinburgh International Festival, but they're looking out for specific artists that they're a big fan of, and or they just want to be in Edinburgh for the festivals and they're not too bothered by who has programmed it. I think one of the identity points for us is how deeply curated everything is. And it obviously is a big differentiation between us and the Fringe. I always feel that the mix of festivals that takes place in Edinburgh during the summer is part of our strength. It's part of what we have to celebrate and embrace and kind of work within. But that deep curation goes across every single part of that eclecticism that you're speaking to. And you know, I think when we're looking at both the internationalism, but also the diversity in sound, expression, tales, textures, styles, genres, it is extremely rare, if not entirely unique, what we do. There are few places in the world that a single entity is able to put together that wide a range of artistic expression.
So if you were going to illustrate then the range of those performances, what would you identify?
Anything from Yuja Wang to Declan McKenna to Shumik Data, all incredibly different sounds and different genres. To have all of that in one festival, I think is quite unique.
You're still an enormously in-demand performer yourself. What do you think that experience as a musician brings to your role as director?
Well, you have first-hand experience of being on the other side on the stage, and first-hand experience of being on the stage in this festival. I remember the first time playing in the Usher Hall with this festival was quite a daunting experience, and I had played in the Usher Hall many times by that point. But you walk into an energy and a kind of a force and an atmosphere that is completely different depending on all the tiny nuances that make up a space. And playing at this festival is not like playing in the Usher Hall at any other time of the year. The tradition and the sense of importance and intense listening and knowing of the audience it's felt very acutely at this festival, and that's something that I've experienced, but all of my colleagues would say the same. And when you spend so many hours practicing your craft, you want that. You want an audience that are so tuned into what you're doing, listening intently. You want to feel that they're really with you. And I think people do experience that very much here. But I would also say that in my particular case, I've done such a wide, diverse range of styles of performances. I've also promoted my own concerts and tours, played in every single type of environment, whether that's a living room, a school, a stadium, or a concert hall, and tried to always address what is the relationship between artist and audience, and how can that communion be strengthened, and looking also at the balance of informal and formal. You need silence, really, when you're playing acoustic instruments in a large place, for it to be heard and for it to be translated. But you also want to feel that the silence isn't a dictated silence, like you must this, but instead the audience wants to be quiet. They're desperate to be as soft as possible so that they can hear into what you're doing as intensely as possible, and looking at all which ways to relax people into that state whilst drawing them into the stage. And some of that is pre-concert information. We're doing so much of that this year, last year, through a kind of podcast series that we have for every single concert, as well as different ways of producing programs and information. How can we speak to people in a natural, personal fashion, but at the same time make sure that it's always substantive. So I think all of that experience is it's very much informed the way I'm doing the job.
Bearing in mind, though, that relationship with the audience, there has been this great debate about whether younger audiences want to film concerts as they're watching them and so on. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. And a friend and colleague of mine, Anna Lapwood, I believe she the organist, I believe she came out to encourage people to film. And I know City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra recently gave a kind of free, you can film what you like. I think it's difficult, and I have very mixed feelings about it, but also very strong feelings about it. On the one hand, one of my pet hates is seeing within a concert hall members of the staff, ushers, running around telling people to stop this, stop that, shush, put that down. Like, it can be a very off-putting experience when you're told off in a place that you've paid for a ticket and you've gone to have a beautiful evening, and you're getting told what to do and what not to do. And I think also the act of that can be 10 times more distracting for everybody around than whatever that person was doing in the first place. So that I'm not a fan of. At the same time, I think it is so unique to have 2,000 people not on devices, sitting, listening and paying attention to something collectively. I think it's so rare in today's environment. And because of that, I would like to experiment more with actually encouraging more of that, and encouraging people before they go into the space to understand that that's what it is. If you're claustrophobic, or if the thought of being still and concentrated for 45 minutes is not for you, there's other ways you can appreciate music. Perhaps that environment isn't for you, but I think that there's a way to prepare people to embrace how unique and special that is. And 45 minutes of your life, or an hour and a half of your life, is not that long a time. I will just finish by saying that in the Usher Hall this year, our central residency and several of our performances, we've actually done away with the stalls and replaced the stalls with beanbags. It's not that people are necessarily getting out their phones every 2 seconds, but it does give a very different and obviously physically more relaxed environment, and people feel freer and less constrained. Now, that is for some people and it's not for others. I think the main aim for the Edinburgh International Festival for us is that we provide a huge myriad, a real diverse range of ways to enjoy the greatest art.
But do you think that inability to concentrate, let's call it, that what phones, what technology has done to us is give us a short attention span. Do you think that makes it harder for people to tap into classical music, that we simply don't have the concentration anymore, the seriousness?
I think it's definitely having an impact on people. I see it having an impact on me. Like my brain will often go to something that I haven't done or somebody I want to write to, and having absolutely concentrated time, whether that's practice or whether that's work or whether that's not interrupted by something coming your way or you trying to send something out via a device, I find quite difficult to resist and to break that pattern. And I didn't grow up with that, so I can only imagine for people 10 years younger than me, or more, it's more intense. However, I will say that the kind of like 12 to 18-year-olds that I know that have grown up with devices much earlier in their lives, I know quite a lot of young people in that age range that have actually also grown up learning a better disciplinary relationship to the devices, and they're better at saying, okay, this time is not, it's not phone time. I'm going to concentrate on something else. I think we always have human trends that are verging in the kind of lack of concentration or discipline or whatever you would equate to be the best of ourselves. I think it is not unique to this time. I think people of all ages still have the capacity to be enthralled by something and drawn into something. I think quite often it's fear or worry or a kind of almost myopic, not in a bad way, but just a myopic discomfort that stops people from being able to really engage with what's in front of them. So I think it's our job to just disarm that as much as we possibly can.
You've been playing since you were 4. There is a discipline, a compartmentalization that involves across your life that in a way is the antithesis of the sort of short attention span that we've been describing. How do you think that discipline has shaped you? What has it meant in terms of how you lead your life?
It's really interesting looking at the discipline of playing an instrument because it is so consistent. From the day I started playing, my mum, who I would describe as a great mix of like deeply loving and pretty strict. I remember from the start, it was this is a privilege that she didn't have, my dad did not have, to learn an instrument. My mum was desperate to learn to play the piano and wouldn't even dare ask her mum because she knew that they couldn't afford it. She just wouldn't have asked the question. So for us, even from the age of 4 or 5, it was, yes, you can have these instruments, but it's not for you it's not a toy. It's not for you just to do what you want with. If you're going to play and if we're going to be paying for lessons, and we were paying for lessons, we're going to play every single day, even if it's for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then it was 15, 20 minutes. So I learned the daily routine discipline quite early, and I would say in a way that was palatable for that age. I remember Lang Lang saying once that there was such intense pressure on him to play the piano, and it worked out well for him because he loved the piano. But if the same intensity had been applied in the same way and he didn't have that love for an instrument, it can be a pretty difficult, if not traumatic, experience. So I would say to any parent or any young person, when you're trying to address that dilemma of where discipline and desire and love for a thing meet, that the more you have that love for something, the more you can apply the discipline to it. And if a young person enjoys playing a bit of violin or flute or piano or guitar, but they're not intense about it, I would say it's still a good thing to do it every day. You don't have to do it for hours, but just do that thing every day. Try to build in good habits, and most importantly, protect your positive relationship to music more than the instrument. That's the most important thing. So listen, be a part of a group, do things that bring a social vibration to the experience of music. For me, to maintain that love for music and curiosity and develop a deeper sense of listening, something that we really try to advocate for at the festival, I think that's for me more important.
When did you realise that it was the violin for you?
I never had to realise it. I'd never questioned playing the violin. I liked it from lesson 3. My first 2 lessons, because I'm left-handed, I tried to play the other way around, and I was so upset that my teacher was like, no, you have to play it this way. But after I kind of accepted that was the way. I don't remember my first lesson. I don't think I remember my first lesson. I've been told the story so many times that it's kind of muddled in my head. But I never once considered not playing the violin. My mum, one day I was fighting her to practice, and she said, well, you don't have to play the violin. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She said, well, if you play the violin, you have to practice. There's no compromise there. And I was so heartbroken that she would consider that I would not want to play the violin. I think I probably never questioned whether I was going to practice ever again.
Was there a piece or a performance that was in some way pivotal for you?
I think when I was about 6 or 7, I learned Salut d'amour by Elgar, a piece I've since recorded, and it's a popular small short kind of salon piece. Elgar wrote so many of those that were just beautiful, and I learned that and was moved to tears by learning the piece. Now that's another thing that I don't really remember, but my mum says that I was actually crying learning the piece, which is a little bit over the top. But obviously I was really young, so it was very instinctive. I was always drawn by the emotion of the music more necessarily than the virtuosity. But I will say that we would drive to school, and my mum, not knowing anything about classical music and certainly not the violin, she just bought like the most famous and promoted CDs that were out there at the time, and it was Kun Wah Chung, Vengerov, and Anna-Sophie Mutter. And she bought Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, Brahms Violin Concerto, and I think Sibelius Violin Concerto, and it was on a cassette tape. And she would just put it on casually as we were driving, so we would just be hearing it. It wasn't like, you have to listen to this. And both me and my sister got to know like these massive big climactic moments, and like the end of the first movement of Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto where the violin is going absolutely crazy. And I don't know if my sister was having exactly the same experience as me, but I certainly was imagining in my mind, like, can you imagine if one day I could play those double stops and those notes, and it just sounded so exciting and so extraordinary, that was quite a moment.
Describe the instrument that you now play for me.
Which one do I play right now? Sorry, I changed recently. Okay, yes. So right now I'm playing a Stradivarius. It's the Gabriel Stradivari, made in 1717. This instrument is quite a shiny sound. It's fairly direct. Doesn't necessarily have the darkness that a lot is often associated with Stradivari. It's quite a treble instrument. I would say I have to work harder on the lower string. It's extremely comfortable. It was like a duck to water the minute I started playing it, and I don't have that. So some violins can swap between violins really easily. I've never been so comfortable with doing that, but it's a dream. It's a dream violin.
Final question. You're passionate about music education. There's the Nicola Benedetti Foundation. It's something that you've spoken about at length. We have a new government. What do you hope for arts funding and arts education?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity now, because many individuals in key positions have a kind of from childhood natural affinity to and respect for and relationship to music education, learning to play instruments, classical music as a part of a kind of life's education. Look, the natural thing to say is we need more money, more funds. What I would say we don't need is more advice and reports. I know hundreds, if not thousands, of teachers and musicians and music education advocates all around the country that know exactly what they would do and what to do, provided they had the structure, the infrastructure, the resource and the support. And that is both manifest at a local level and at a national level. So that, of course, is things need to be funded and paid for. But the structure and infrastructure needs to be there to allow them to do their job. So that can be anything from time within a week, within a school, to have some moment for music that is actually protected and prioritized. It can be something like access to instruments, teacher training and support, head teacher advocacy for music to be a part of what classes as a first-rate education for everyone. This is something that I could talk about for a long time, but I don't want to give a cliche answer of, well, if X million were given to this, then that would solve the problems. I've spent too many years within this kind of realm to know that it's not as simple as that. It takes the whole nation to look at this as a necessary part of a great education.
Are you hoping or expecting to talk to the Culture Minister, Lisa Nandy, or indeed the Prime Minister, who himself is a trained musician, anytime soon?
Yes, be reaching out to everyone.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Nicola Benedetti.
Thank you so much for having me.